Well, we're off and running on the Krueger Show. We're in the month of May now, May 2nd, 2024. Hope everybody's having a great day today. Beautiful day in the Bay Area. Going to go watch my kid play a little high school baseball later this afternoon. Yes, fired up about that. Go Northgate. They almost got Campolindo the other day. Today they'll be in Moraga for a little back in
Miramonte.
Little home and home with Campolindo. And Northgate needs a win bad. All right, so yeah, I think
that's
we're
good.
We might be 3-18 this year. We're having a rough baseball season, but we need a win, and maybe today's the day.
You know what's funny, Larry, is I bet. How long is one of those baseball games?
They're pretty long. I mean, there's 7 innings, but right. I mean, they last pretty long. I mean, I looked 2.5 hours.
Oh, exactly. I looked last night. You know how many games the San Francisco Giants have played that are 3 hours or longer this year?
Probably 1?
2. And one was exactly 3 hours. Then only they are getting beat quickly, which right. I guess if you're going to lose is the best way to lose. But if you're going to a game, you're not getting your money's worth, man. Like these games are now like 45 minutes to an hour shorter than football games. I don't think that was the intention.
No. Nothing's longer than college football, of course. That just is an endless endeavor. And we're here to talk about the 2 most popular sports in America, pro football and college football. The transition from
I thought it was podcasting is one of the most popular sports in America.
I saw that you sat down with Mason Pline's college coach.
Yeah.
And I just retweeted that this morning.
Clay Hendricks.
In fact, that might be worth of a screen share. I really like Mason Pline quite a bit. I think he's a really good prospect, and I think the Niners got a nice little steal with Mason Pline. In fact, I am going to share the screen here so people can check this out. This is you sitting down with his college coach, correct?
Furman's in South Carolina, but he was the offensive coordinator for 7 years and the O-line coach for 10 years at Air Force with Troy Calhoun.
Wow.
So he knows what the Shanahans do, right? Because Troy came to Air Force from working for Mike Shanahan and with Kyle, for Gary Kubiak. So, he's this guy. You don't find a lot of OCs that are O-line coaches, right? As you know.
Yeah.
That's a very unique combination. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's less so at Arizona, at Air Force, but.
Let me see. There we go. We get the volume up. Here's guy with the head coach for Furman. You said they're based where?
Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville, South Carolina, the home of DJ Jones. All right, here it is.
Pro scouts ask me sometimes, Coach, well, I knew what they were asking. And I said, no,
is he soft? Is what they're asking. Is he soft?
Yeah, essentially. And I said, but I think the thing about him, his best days are clearly ahead of him. I was excited to see where he's going. I think that's a great fit for him. And I really enjoyed watching them play. I just like to watch them play. And they do some pretty cool stuff. They run the ball. They use the tight ends, all those different things.
I saw him say he thinks he needs to be a better route runner. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I probably agree with that a little bit. He just hadn't played football that much. I think it's just the more he plays, the more he's doing just football. I don't think he's even close to maxing out what his abilities are.
Very interesting stuff. And excuse me, I thought, I only watched a little bit of his film, but he high points the ball. He was competitive at the catch point. He looked like he had pretty decent hands. He took a couple hits and held on. But what intrigued me was when I saw his basketball tape. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, he played basketball. This guy was an above the rim basketball player. I mean, this guy's throwing it down on the break and, tomahawk reversing, and he showed big time athleticism. And then I started reading the story and I'm like, wait, this guy, the profile, he's like 10.5-inch hands, started as a basketball and baseball player at Ferris State. So obviously he's an all around athlete. The 6'8" size, obviously you can't coach. 10.5-inch hands. But then the fact that he was a mechanical engineering major, I mean, that just shows that, he's a really, really smart guy. And I think you need to be a really smart guy to play tight end in this offense. So I'm excited. To me, Pline might be the second most exciting tight end they have behind Kittle. They seem a little lean there, and it seems like a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, I mean, he is, I would say, more dynamic for sure, right? We'll see. As you said, we'll get to rookie minicamp and see, but Cam Latu's hands, from what we saw last year, left to be very desired, unfortunately. I thought what he said at the end there was really, what he said at the end of that clip was really interesting, right? This is a guy who's played 3 years of football in college, but he had 4 catches in 2 years at Ferris State. So, and what was not in that clip, if you watch the full interview, Hendrick says, they don't use tight ends there. He goes, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Mason was his own position coach at Ferris State.
Wow. So he had no coach. Even.
Yeah. And there's probably, for all we know, I mean, maybe that means he was the only tight end on the roster. I don't know. But so I just, that's interesting, right? The level of upside there. And I'm with you. When you watch him, you see really good movement. He moves really well and he catches the ball. Like he knows his body. You and I went to the local pro day, which whatever. But I think when you watch tight ends in person, especially, you can tell pretty quickly, like who moves with fluidity and who doesn't, who kind of knows where their feet are, where their hands are. There's just a lot going on, especially in the middle of the field. And these are big people. There's, you think about like your traditional big man before basketball, big men started to move out, dribble, shoot threes. These were guys that had to be a little more deliberate because their feet and their hands are like 7.5 feet apart. Like there's just a lot going on, right? And so they didn't always have good feel. Like this guy just has good kind of awareness of his own body, I think, when you watch him. And that stands out. And he's tough, right? Like he's not afraid. The basketball does not come out in him, which I thought was a telling comment.
Basketball players everywhere are like, you're calling us all, weak, but it's just a different level of physicality. And some guys don't adjust to the physicality. They can run the routes, they can do everything, but they just don't want to be physical. They don't want to put their body in front of a defensive end. They don't want to stonewall a blitzer off the edge. They don't want to catch the ball in the middle of the field and get crunched on both sides of their body by guys, who are coming at them at a pretty high rate of speed, so it's just a different sport and different mindset. And, by the way, the Niners I'm looking at their roster right now. They've got George Kittle, Cam Latu in year 2. We'll find out. Braden Willis, same thing. Eric Saubert, who's kind of a journeyman, Mason Pline, and Jake Tungs from Cal, who was on their practice squad last year and remains there going into this offseason. So they have 6 tight ends on the roster, but it's funny. I was watching Coach Yak the other day on Twitter say that he thinks they ought to go after Robert Tonyan, and I kind of agree with that. I think they are one more. They're a little thin at tight end as far as proven players, but I think it's a great opportunity for Pline to make the roster. And, if you could find a Charlie Warner light, some blocking tight end that is out there that's still could give you a little something as a line of scrimmage blocker. And then you could use Pline as your kind of second, your tight end receiver. I think that might not be a bad combination. So we'll see. We'll see what they look like this summer. What did you think of the
opportunity?
He's got an opportunity.
He's got an opportunity.
He's got an opportunity, and he's super talented. And I liked him based on traits. It's funny. I was talking to Ethan Sherwood Strauss the other day, who's we've done a couple streams, and he's like, he's a big Niner fan, even though he's a big basketball media guy. And he's like, I think you put the Niners onto him. I'm like, no, come on, don't even be ridiculous. But I do. Once I saw a basketball player, 10.5-inch hands, mechanical engineering major, I thought, my God, I mean, this is a very, very good prospect, at least on paper. And you never know beyond that, because there's not a lot of film to go on. But I'm eager to see what he looks like this summer. What'd you think of the draft overall? Before we started with Mason Pline. But what'd you think of the draft overall for the Niners?
Start with the big headline.
Yeah.
Generally, I would say I liked it. Like, I think I probably liked. I'm in the group of people that like the Ricky Pearsall pick more than most. I would say.
Why is that? Why do you like him?
Because he's productive. I think he's got a high floor, and athletically, I think he fits in. I think he's smart. I think he's tough. He makes difficult catches. I think he'll be in the right place at the right time. I mean, I think one thing we've seen with the Niners the last few years, and it's a little unfair to Ronnie Bell because he was a 7th round pick, but it definitely applies to Danny Gray. It's like you don't get that many opportunities. And I would say the same thing for Jacob Cowing. You don't get that many opportunities. So when you get a chance, like you better be in the right place at the right time and you better catch the ball. And to me, both Cowing and Pearsall, and I really like the Cowing pick in the 4th round, but like both those guys they know what they're supposed to do. There's nothing about them that says project. When you watch Danny Gray in practice, you go, hey, I appreciate that he's playing special teams. Like, I think he's tough, but he doesn't catch the ball every time in drills. His speed doesn't really show up when they put him on the field in games. He's battled some injuries. Like, it feels like the boat has passed on him, right? And maybe on another team he'd have more time, but this is a team that doesn't have a lot of time, Now you do have time in the sense that, well, guys are aging, and then in 3 or 4 years, maybe you'll be ready and you can be the man. But I just think Pearsall checks a lot of boxes. Like, the idea that, Cooper DeJean or DeJean, I still haven't said it right, Larry.
I think
should have been
DeJean.
A.D. Mitchell. Like people are like, A.D. Mitchell, it's an overdraft on Ricky. Should have been at the times. Like, what about A.D.? What about DeJean? Well, then you watch, and those guys didn't go 32 or 33. So I think at that point, I'm not too concerned about value at 31 in this draft because I think you just had your pick of like, none of these guys are 31 on anybody's board at that point. And they were trying to trade the pick. They couldn't trade the pick. But I think he's a good player. Like fundamentally, I think he's a good player. He's going to make some plays for him. So, I just think he fits in,
I think in some ways Pearsall could be the perfect weapon for Purdy. I mean, a lot of people said, hey, Xavier Worthy. I watched tons of Xavier Worthy in the last month. He runs go routes on the sideline exclusively, almost. I mean, I saw maybe 80% of the routes I saw from him, go routes on the sideline. All right, well, that's great. But Purdy if you really want to help Brock Purdy, you want to give him a weapon that he can really utilize on 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. Those plays come up all the time. He likes to operate in the middle of the field. So if you could find forget Pearsall for a second. If you could just say, what's the perfect receiver to go with Brock? It's a sticky fingered across the middle guy who can run routes, have ball skills, and be kind of a trusted agent on 3rd down. I think he's going to be a guy that when they establish the rapport is going to be maddening for defenses because he's a continuity piece. Every time they get to 3rd and 4, this guy can do a little stop route, a little in, a little out, and him and Purdy are on the same page, and Purdy throws the ball with anticipation, and this guy, runs his routes with precision, and that combination could be absolutely deadly. So, I mean, to me, I understand people who are dreaming the dream of Xavier Worthy because Xavier Worthy runs 4.21 and people are dreaming big dreams. But you know what? It's, it's like the old Rolling Stones song. You can't always get what you want, but you try sometimes and you find you get what you need. Right. And they got what they needed. And that is what Brock Purdy needed. He needed a Ricky Pearsall type guy, and we'll see how it works out. But I think they're hand in glove, almost perfect for each other.
I think the Niners offensively are always interesting to talk about. One reason is because they're kind of an ensemble cast, right? Like a star ensemble cast. Think Ocean's 11. Like there's a bunch of stars who carry movies individually, but in this film together, they play some smaller roles, and they all, it's kind of incumbent on all of them to fit in well. And when everyone does their job, you get like an incredible film. The problem is that like you take one of those people away, in the case of the Niners, like Debo gets hurt, and all of a sudden ensemble cast looks like really shorthanded cast very quickly. And so I do think they need to beef up kind of that Ray McLeod spot a little bit, and I think Ricky Pearsall does that.
They're loaded at receiver now. Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Pearsall, Cowing, Ronnie Bell, Trent Taylor, Tay Martin, Chris Conley, Danny Gray, Terrell Owens' son, Tariq Owens. They got 11 receivers. They probably are only going to keep 5, maybe 6. So that means if they don't move any of the big 3, It's Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Pearsall, and Cowing.
Yep.
Before we get into the number crunch there, you do a lot of stuff with the Pac-12, and you've seen Cowing, who started at UTEP and finished at Arizona. Here's Cowing's last 2 games. Territorial Cup against ASU. 9 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. Bowl game against Oklahoma. 7 catches, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns. This guy had 16 catches for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. I'm a huge fan. Tell me, you sound like you are as well. I love this pick for the Niners. What do you like about Cowing's game? How do you think it translates to the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, well, he's fast. He's smart. He's a willing blocker. He's not big.
No.
So his catch radius is not large, but he's a guy that came to Arizona after some time at UTEP, came home to Arizona, had a son, wanted to be closer, or a child. I'm not sure if it was a boy, but wanted to be closer to his child. And to me, that can always go one of 2 ways in college. When a player comes home, it can either be good or bad.
Sure.
For him, it was very good. And, I just imagine that if you're him, you're coming home, you have a child, you've got these responsibilities. And he absolutely balled out. Like he went from and here's the other part of it, Larry. He went from the center of attention at UTEP, was a 1,300-yard receiver, carried their whole offense. Comes to Arizona. His first year at Arizona, they had 3 of like the top 5 receivers in the league because they had a freshman named Tetairoa McMillan, who might win he might be the first receiver drafted next year. And they had a guy named Dorian Singer, who left, played at SC last year, now is at Utah. But 2 years ago, was one of the leading receivers in the league. So they had, it wasn't like 3,000-yard guys, but that's basically what they were. And he fit in really well on a team that was stacked, meaning he wasn't the center of attention and he was still very productive. So I talked to Jason Shear, who covers them for 24/7. I did a video on that. But yes, he runs a lot of go balls. Yes, he can run over the middle. Yes, they would use him a lot and just like, let's get him in space and have him make plays. They went through 2 quarterbacks for Jaden DeLora and then Noah Fafita. And Noah Fafita, they really took off with him. And he, Jed Fish has a lot of pro-style stuff in his offense. So I think he's experienced. I think he's smart. I think he's fast. I think he's reliable. He doesn't drop the ball. He's just, again, to me, like a really high floor guy. I don't see how the Niners, to me, it'd be a stunner if 2 rookies are not among the 5. If it's not Cowing and Pearsall, I'll be kind of disappointed, honestly. Because I think they're both better than everything. Yeah, it would just be a big letdown if it's not. So, he's not big. He's not big. And that's a factor. But to me, he's like Pearsall. You're not going to get 7 targets on this team. You're not going to get 4 probably a game. Hell, Ayuk gets 4. But you might get 2, and it might be big. So you better catch it. You better be in the right spot. You better be trustworthy, reliable. And he is. So, and I do wonder, like,
the Arizona connection, Purdy, Cowing, and Pearsall, all Arizona guys. Not U of A, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe there's something too. Like, we saw this with baseball guys, right? Warm weather, play year round, all that kind of stuff. Maybe there's something to it. I mean, the high school football in Arizona is really good. Yeah, I just think this draft is a lot of old guys in this draft.
Right.
So if you're not productive, that's what makes Garendo, who we can talk about later, interesting. He started for the first time in the last game of his 6-year college career.
Isn't that amazing? One start.
It's wild in the bowl game.
And he was awesome. He was awesome against SC in that bowl game.
So you've got a lot of production. You've got a lot of experience. I think snarky's not the word, but like, I don't want to bring up Trey, but just all these guys, you get these drafts now that are nothing like the Lance pick, right? Which is like 1 year big projection, right? Yeah. And that's not Trey. It's not about Trey, but like, this is the opposite of that. So you wonder, like, are all these guys already kind of near their ceilings? Well, maybe, right? Maybe. We'll see. But the Niners have the top line guys right now, so they don't need Jacob Cowing to be the top line guy. They need him to fit in and be reliable, and I think he'll be that.
There was a theme in the draft there. There was a lot of 5th-year seniors, 6-year seniors. grad transfers, that kind of thing. And largely because of the pandemic. And, but I mean, also the 49ers are in their window, in their Super Bowl win. Their Super Bowl window is wide open right now. They don't have time. They don't have time, as you said very well off the start. They don't have time to sit around and babysit anybody and have the guy develop in 3 years. They need to get as much production out of their draft class this year as they possibly can. I'm kind of wondering after this draft, does that mean Ronnie Bell, Trent Taylor, Tay Martin, Conley, Gray, Owens kid, they're all just cut? Or do you believe the reports coming out of Pittsburgh that Omar Khan still has interest in trading for a wideout and still is talking to the Niners about Debo and Ayuk and would love to add a player? I mean, what do you think? You think Debo and Ayuk and Jennings are here for the year, or does this newfound depth after June 1st, when I think Debo, you can save like $22 million or something like that on the cap if they move him after June 1st. Do you think they're still open to moving Debo, or do you think that window's closed and they're going to keep everybody for one last run? Kind of like the Bulls. People are comparing it to the Chicago Bulls. One last dance kind of a thing. What's your guess on the wide receivers? Do they keep Debo and Ayuk and Jennings this year, or do we see the rarest of rare, which is a significant player traded after June 1st?
I think they keep them. I think it's kind of crazy not to keep them. If you're Omar Khan, you should be interested in Brandon Ayuk, because now you don't even have to give up a pick in this year's draft. So, yeah, you should be. Of course, I mean, you should be interested. Especially given how cheap your quarterback is. Quarterbacks are this year. Debo, to me, again, like, interested for what? For a 4th round pick? Like, sure, maybe he's interested, but he's just worth too much to the 49ers. And you can't afford him this year. So to me, not only is there no urgency to do it, it's counterproductive. What are you getting? Now, maybe.
I mean, Grant suggested that, maybe you trade him there for one of their 2 tight ends, right? They have Darnell Washington from Georgia, who they sitting behind Freiermuth, and he's like, hey, how about Freiermuth and Darnell Washington and a 2025 draft choice for Debo? Would you consider that, or is that not?
Does that make you better this year? It's creative. I give Grant credit.
Might make your cap better, but I don't know if it makes you. I think it probably makes
your cap
worse.
Doesn't need to be better this year. Your cap's fine this year. I don't like, how many targets is that guy getting on this team? Now, the one thing I would say is, like, you go, oh, guys, we could throw the ball 30 if we wanted to. We could throw the ball 20 times to Isaac Guerendo. We could use Guerendo as like kind of a accent to McCaffrey to replace the stuff that Debo does. Everyone's so down on Debo, Larry, and maybe even they are after that Super Bowl. I
don't think he was healthy. I don't think he was healthy in that game. I really don't. I mean, I saw the guy the weeks before that.
I get what happened in the Super Bowl. I know you haven't beaten the Chiefs twice with that guy, but he's also done something that few football players do, which is carry you to championship games. Debo's done that. Debo's carried teams in playoff games. Like, not a lot of people do that. So I have a little more grace for Debo right now, and I just think he's critically important. Ayuk makes no sense to trade Brandon Ayuk, especially for a future pick.
He should be here long term.
He's the guy that should be here the longest based on his age with Brock. And the other thing I want to say about this is, while I like the Ricky Pearsall pick, let's not get carried away. I'm like, well, we got Ricky Pearsall now.
Right.
We can move Debo. Oh, okay, cool. Good idea. Based on all the NFL games Ricky Pearsall's won. So I like Ricky, but let's just chill on, we found Debo's replacement. Debo's only one of the most unique and valuable players in the NFL in the last 5 years. But no. We got Ricky Pearsall. If they thought Ricky Pearsall was the Debo replacement, they wouldn't have spent 8 minutes trying to trade the pick, Larry.
Right.
So let's just have the right amount. Let's have the Goldilocks amount here of optimism on Ricky, and also recognize that your offense changes drastically if you just trade Debo Samuel in June. Not to mention, And I know this team handles this stuff really well. What does that do to your locker room when you're trying to win a championship and you trade Deebo Samuel for a future third and Darnell Washington?
Yeah, I mean,
which is
it sends a
trade.
message.
But I think everybody. It was a weird 2 days when all those Deebo rumors. That was a weird 2 days with all those Deebo rumors.
Well, and you're totally right. As far as there's one thing to be optimistic about a rookie, but then we're talking about guys who are doing it. I mean, at a high level. Deebo Samuel was the Super Bowl MVP favorite at halftime of Super Bowl 54, and then only touched the ball twice in the second half, and I don't necessarily put that on him. So, I think he's done an incredible job as a 49er, and he's a tone setter, and it's like, what's the hardest thing to find on a football team? Tone setters. Everybody can be part of the team, but not everybody wants to, front the whole thing. Trent Williams, tone setter. Deebo Samuel, tone setter. It means more than just, dancing in front of the boom box on the way out of the locker room. These guys are tone setters in the biggest games. And when you have a tone setting player, man, I think you gather those guys up and you hoard them. You don't move off of them. So I'm with you. I like Deebo, and I hope he's here for the year. Now, you mentioned Guerendo. Let's talk about the running back field now. They got Christian. They still have Elijah Mitchell, J.P. Mason. A lot of us wanted to see more of J.P. Mason. They also have Juszczyk, who's their fullback. And now they've added Isaac Guerendo. They also added Patrick Taylor in free agency, who's probably just a guy. And then after the draft, they got Cody Schrader from Missouri, who's just a monster. I mean, he led the SEC in rushing this year. In some ways, he's a better pure running back than Guerendo. Guerendo's an amazing athlete, though. 6'1", 220, 4.33 speed. He's big and he's fast and he's intriguing and he's raw, and he's never been a bell cow back anywhere he's been, but he had a monster bowl game against USC, 160-something yards and 2 touchdowns. I mentioned that I think Guerendo could be like the futuristic fullback because I don't see a pick and slide natural running back. He was Mr. Indiana in high school as a wide receiver. So he's got receiving ability. You kind of mentioned that just a second ago. How do you see Guerendo? How do you see Cody Schrader, who didn't run a great 40 time, but I really don't care about that. He did it in the SEC against the best athletes in college football, and I think he's kind of like a poor man's Blake Corum. I kind of like Cody Schrader a lot. What do you think of that? Those two additions?
Yeah, I really like them both. Like, you start looking at it, you go, how are you going to keep all these guys? Because somebody else likes them too. Smart of those guys to sign with the Niners. And I should say to your audience, Larry, people who aren't subbed to my channel, if I may, I've done a bunch of interviews over the last few days with mostly guys from 24/7 sports pages that cover these guys. So like the guy that covers Missouri. This morning I just did one with a guy named Michael McCammon who covers Louisville. And I asked him, like, how is this guy not the starter? He's got 4.33 speed. He's huge. He's like at the combine in the 97th to 99th percentile and all these critical things. He came from Wisconsin to Louisville. Like, usually that guy gets to start, right? And basically what he said was Louisville had a really good running back with speed. And this guy came in.
Kawar Jordan or something.
Yeah. I think he got drafted too.
Yeah.
And he said Guerendo came in and didn't he didn't transfer on the condition that he become the starter or anything like that. And he got a bunch of carries. It's interesting because he's a 6-year guy, 5 years of playing, less than 300 career carries.
Right. He's there's the mileage is low. If it's a car, it's a low mileage car.
It's a low mileage car. Now, it's still a little odd that you play that long at Wisconsin and never become the guy. They have good backs at Wisconsin. But you look at all the measurables, they're all there. Louisville is a complicated offense, so you got to learn a lot. There's a lot to know. Meaning, because I asked this guy Michael when I talked to him about 30 minutes ago about the Juszczyk idea, And my thing with Juice is always like easy to replace him in theory, harder to replace him in practice, because there's so much that he does from a blocking standpoint, athletically, and there's so much he understands. Think of all the times you watch the Niners. There's multiple clips I've filmed and posted them where somebody's in the wrong place, and it's use check, not the quarterback bringing the person into the right place. So there's a lot. I say all that just to say, like, it's a lot harder to find the next use check than just like finding a similar body type. But that said, I ran that by this guy Michael today, and he's a smart guy. He's a good reliable blocker, good pass catcher, good runner. So maybe there is something to that. He does have a really, really impressive skill set. So I like him, and the same deal with Schrader, the guy from Missouri, Gabe DeArmond. I asked him, like, what's his deal? He's like, well, he's not big enough and he's not fast enough. That's basically his deal. And yet, he's a really productive SEC running back.
Right.
So he's a guy that, again, I think kind of fits in with this Niners draft that's not a bunch of 5-star guys. You notice that? It's older guys who are not premium prospects coming out of high school for the most part, which means you've kind of, you've been through you've had to prove yourself, basically. And think about the Niners group as it is. Ayuk was a JC transfer, right? I mean, like, they have a lot of Christian's kind of the outlier of like just stud the whole time,
Kittle barely did anything at Iowa.
But yeah, exactly.
I mean, he was a 5th-round pick for a reason. Supposedly I saw Daniel Jeremiah said that, or somebody was saying that, I think it was maybe one of the insiders said that, I think it was Schefter, said that the Niners and the Rams were both interested in the tight end who played for the Chargers, and they couldn't get him. The Niners, he went to the Rams and then went to the Chargers, and the Niners really liked him. They didn't get him. He instead went to the Rams, and then they took Kittle in the 5th round. So, it kind of shows sometimes, though.
Who I heard, maybe it was DJ. I did hear somebody talking about that. Yeah,
it was not Evan Ingram, but no. I forget his name. But the guy who's a really athletic tight end, and he went to the Rams, and that made the Niners go for Kittle later. And the rest is history. Kittle has obviously been really, really good. Everybody wanted the offensive line to be addressed, and the kind of the prevailing story coming out of the draft is, well, they didn't draft any offensive linemen. But then, I've been spending the last few days digging deep on all the guys they've added, and they've added some really kind of intriguing guys. Dominic Pooney from Kansas looks like he might be able to come in and start at right guard. He definitely is versatile. He's tough. He's athletic. He wanted to be a Niner. Then I saw the interview with Jarrett Kingston, who I didn't really like that pick, but I saw the interview that he did. He's incredibly strong. He's kind of a short arm guy. He might be a center or a guard, but there's some likable traits there with Kingston, who transferred, I think, from Wazoo to SC because his mom loved SC. But he's intriguing because he's really strong, 36 reps on the bench, and he's got some decent film. Then there's Drake Nugent, who was a really good player at Stanford, who transferred to Michigan, was first team All Big Ten, and was Stanford's captain. And he's kind of a tough guy, even though he's a bit short at 6'1", but at center, that doesn't bother me that much. And then they also got Bryson Mays from Southern Miss, who is another guy. Really, he's got some great measurables, really athletic. They didn't get a blue chip guy necessarily. I guess maybe you could call Pooney that, but they didn't get a round 1 guy, but they did add 4 offensive linemen that have traits. And to me, it's going to be interesting to see. We kind of know it's going to be Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, probably Feliciano and McKivitz on the right side. And then they have their backups. They like Ben Barch. They've stated here they like Jalen Moore as their swing tackle. There's Spencer Burford. There's Corey Luciano. They brought in Brandon Parker from the Raiders. But though, and they still have Nick Sakel, who's Purdy's buddy, and we'll see if he plays center or guard or what. But they brought in 4 different prospects that all in this draft, either during or after, that none of them are tackles, so that frustrates a lot of people. But they all look like they're pretty athletic and pretty intriguing prospects. What do you think? Did the Niners blow it by not going for a tackle in this draft, or did they just not have a pick where where the tackles were and they played it the way they needed to play it? I mean, how do you see the way how do you look at their offensive line right now?
Well, I don't think they ultimately had the pick. I mean, I was not. I know a lot of people wanted them to draft Suma Kingsley,
right?
Sumataya. I didn't.
Suma Itea or Teia.
I'm missing a vowel in there. I know, but that felt like too much of a project. Let me read to you. I texted a buddy of mine who coached at Kansas. Now he's coaching somewhere else, but coached at Kansas the last several years.
Yeah.
And to ask him about Pooney. And this is what he said. He was rock solid for us, projects interior, really good feet, and athletic for his measurables, smart, really understands the game, good job in pass pro. Biggest knock would be creating movement and recreating the line of scrimmage in the run game. Just wasn't asked to do that a lot in our scheme because we didn't have guys around him to consistently impose our will on people in the run game. So that was from a Kansas coach. Said more stuff about him as a guy that he really liked. So what do you make? What do you think of that scouting report I just gave you?
Well, I mean, I kind of like what I've seen from him in that he does have good feet. He seems like he likes to get after it. He seems like a guy who really wants to, punish the defensive lineman who's opposite him. I think that there's traits there with toughness and athleticism that I like, but I also see that he's going to need some time with Chris Forster. I mean, they're going to need to coach him up and get him better. I don't know that he's a plug and play guy. To me, he might be like week 10 or something like that. They plug him in at right guard. I don't see him being like, day one, Feliciano Burford, sit down, Pooney's here. You know what I mean? But I do think he could be a long-time starter on this line.
The other one was everyone wanted Rosengarten. And I had no problem with them not moving for Rosengarten.
I don't either, because I saw Rosengarten just get absolutely destroyed by the Wolverines in the second half of the Natty, and I was like, I don't know. That's so fresh in my mind. I just thought I liked Rosengarten like in round 4, but he was just these tackles get way overdrafted.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, watching Mays is explosive, and I've had people tell me that they really feel like Nugent is a much better player. Now, I saw Michael Hall in the Ohio State game just turn him into a turnstile. I mean, it was just like the speed of Michael Hall was way too much for Drake Nugent in that game. But that's Michael Hall, who ran 4.76 and was the fastest defensive tackle in the draft. Not every, I like Nugent's strength more than I like Jake Brendel's strength. So that could be a factor, trying to stonewall those huge bodied defensive tackles that, DJ Reader made Brendel look pretty bad last year. Chris Jones you're going to have to eventually block Chris Jones if you want a ring. So I don't know. I mean, I like the accountability, the smarts, and the toughness of Nugent. I'm wondering if he has the feet and the quickness to be able to defend the quicker interior guys.
I'm with you on Kingston. It's a 6th round pick. So, USC's offensive line was kind of like USC's defense when the Niners drafted Drake Jackson, just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Their offensive line has been all over the place, was all over the place last year. Injuries, guys moving positions. So maybe it's hard to give a full, fair eval of a guy, but the team that he played for at Washington State was a more physical-ish team than Washington State under Mike Leach on offense. So, I mean, I know he walked in his graduation at Wazoo and like senior day. I think they thought he was going pro, and then he went to SC. So yeah, I think one thing is clear with the Niners is like they're okay with their offensive line, right? I know there's a lot of this discussion of the Niners like their offensive line more than the public likes their offensive line. And even though I wouldn't want to see a guard rotation 3 years in a row. I do understand it if you're them. You go, hey, we got to the Super Bowl with this offensive line. We had Ricky Pearsall. We had Jacob Cowing. Like, we're just going to get Brock makes quick decisions. We'll get the ball out of his hands. We'll keep teams off balance with the run game. I don't want to feed into a stereotype, but Kyle does kind of think like, this is good enough for me. I can help them with the way I call plays and with the weapons we have. So, to me, Pooney is the guy that I think we could see the soonest. I'd be surprised if Jarrett Kingston ever, starts a game for the 49ers.
I don't know if you're scheduled, because I know you may have to go, but
I got moved back, so I'm okay. We're not in a rush. Okay. I've got probably we got like 20 minutes, so we're good.
Okay, great. Okay, well, what do you think of the defensive additions? Excuse me. They added Malik Mustafa, and for people saying, "Oh, it's Malik," no, it's Malik. And to me, his interview was so impressive when I saw him talking.
Yeah,
this guy. I'll amend. I said Cowing was my favorite player, and I do like Cowing quite a bit. I'll amend that after watching the interviews of Mustafa. Mustafa and Renardo Green, I think, give the Niners secondary those two dogs that they lost when they lost Jimmy Ward and Emmanuel Mosley. And I love the picks of Malik Mustafa and Renardo Green. Kuiper said the Renardo Green was a 2-round reach, and I understand what he's saying. But I see a guy who's just really, really tough and versatile. So I love both those picks. What do you think of the two DBs that they added?
A buddy of mine at Florida State, this was his text. He's on the staff of Florida State.
Yeah.
On Renardo Green, he said, man-to-man, even-keeled, very steady, never panics, always calm, very good technique. And, you talked about the Ohio State game for Drake Nugent. I mean, watch pro guys against pro guys, right? Watch your guy against pro guys. Well, they locked up Malik Neighbors week 1 against LSU. Malik Neighbors had 62 receiving yards that game.
Right.
He did well. Like, they did well against Florida at the end of the year at Ricky Pearsall. It does feel like, and this is par for the course, I guess, with the Niners, but I'd add Bethune, the 7th-round linebacker. All three of these guys are just kind of their types of guys, right? In terms
athletes, real good athletes.
I'll tell you who Renardo Green feels like to me is a defensive Ayuk.
Okay.
Like, maybe not like Ayuk in his draft was not the first receiver you would take. Physically, not quite some of those other guys in terms of how you project him, but is probably going to pick a fight with somebody in practice and is going to play bigger than his size. Like, that to me is Renardo Green also. So, I talked to their 24/7 sports guy who's very locked in on draft stuff as well, Brendan Sonnone. He thinks Green can play nickel or outside, which, he's like, he said to me, he's like, I don't know how the Niners feel about how much size they need at nickel. And I was like, well, they played Damador Lenore at nickel, so they don't.
K'Wan Williams was the nickel for a couple of years.
Yeah, they don't need a 6'1" guy at nickel. So that to me is intriguing. But like, to me, Green is just one of those, like, look who he played against. Look how he did against those guys. Look at the teams they played. Like, and then then his interview. I mean, he's just exactly what you want out of a corner. He's so super brash, super confident. Sorry to interrupt you, but I forgot. You just reminded me. The other thing that reminded me of Ayuk when I watched him was how serious he is. Yeah. And he said in his interview, I don't know if it was like the general media interview or the one he did with Lindsey Perales at 49ers.com, but he goes, I've been playing football for 20 years. And I just started dying laughing. Like, this guy's 24. He's like, I've been playing football for 20, as if he put that on his resume, a 20-year football veteran. Because that's how these kids in Florida, they start playing tackle football when they're 5. Right. So, I kind of chuckle at it, but I just love that in his mind, he is a 20-year football. He's been doing this for 20 years. Like, I think that's awesome. That means that when he was 12, like, he saw some pattern that in his mind he's going to be able to reference because the Little Giants tried to pull the annexation of Puerto Rico, and he's got that filed away in his brain, right? Like, I just love that perspective. I don't actually think 12-year-old football is going to help him necessarily.
Right.
But I just love that he thinks that he's been preparing for this moment. Not he thinks, he has been preparing for this for 20 years. Like, I think that's really unique. And he just has a seriousness to him that reminded me of Ayuk.
It's funny too, because, I thought Coach Yak had a great tweet today. I'm going to share the screen on this one. This is a good one. This is Renardo Green. And this is Renardo Green's reaction to his being drafted. Now, he's already talked to the Niners, so he knew it was happening. But look at the room here and look at him. Hold on a second here. We'll back this up so we can see the whole part of it. But he's watching at the TV in a room full of people when he gets drafted. Here he is standing in front of the TV, just seemingly, just as you said, serious the whole time.
San Francisco 49ers select Renardo.
I mean, it's just like no reaction. Just, it's like, hey man, this is what I expect. And I just, there's something about him that just is all business. He's all business.
The one thing Brendan, who covered him at Florida State, told me, he's like, it was weird. He was not great on fade balls. He said he struggled with that, defending a fade for some reason, like end zone fades. So I don't know if that showed up to you when you watched him, or if you even care.
The only thing that showed up to me is that his body placement was a little bit all over the place on the deep ball. Like, he's really good on all the short and intermediate stuff. I mean, the footwork's perfect. The positioning's perfect. On the deep ball, it's like, it was almost like he was indecisive. Did he want to be in? Did he want to be outside? Does he want to be engaged? Did he want to be, play the ball, play the man? He just seemed like a little in his thoughts there. But I mean, what he has, you can't teach, which is this super aggressiveness and this, this fiery, I'm going to come up like a, he's a hitter. I mean, this guy wants to hit. And the one thing the Niners, everybody's been talking about, Chase Young doesn't set the edge and this and that. The guys who really set the edge in the run game.
Just for the record, you started that. So
yeah, but I'm sorry, as far
everybody's talking about.
Well, no, I mean, I started the Chase Young was dogging it in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, as far as setting the edge, a lot of the edge setting gets done by the corners. And Emmanuel Mosley was an outstanding edge setter, very physical, would come flying up. And this guy does the same kind of thing with reckless abandon. And that's what the corners set the edge in the run game. And so you got to be a physical player, and you got to be able to put your nose in there, and you got to be wanting and willing to put your nose in there. And Green is. So I really like that. And Mustafa, to me, is maybe one of the better safeties in the draft, in that he hits like a truck, but he also has feet and can cover. And they used him in this bandit role where they used him short. They used him in the intermediate. He was playing in the deep quadrants of the field. So he's played all over the place, but I love his mentality. I mean, his interviews were like this guy's going to be one of the leaders on the team, like day one. Okay, couple last ones. I'm a huge fan of Tanner Mordecai, and I couldn't believe that when I saw him. I was like, this guy's much better now than people think. I see a lot of the same traits that I saw in Purdy in this guy. Do you have anybody who said anything about Mordecai? Because Mordecai, started at Oklahoma, didn't play, only played 12 games, sat behind some really good quarterbacks, then transferred to SMU, put up ridiculous numbers in that offense. Yeah. Then went to Wisconsin the last year, 9 touchdowns, 4 picks. But I mean, this guy had like 67 touchdowns and like 15 interceptions in the 2 years before he went to Wisconsin. And then what I'm looking at is a guy who's got all the traits you want. Like he's got 4.46 speed. So he can really run away from defensive players. He's courageous running in the middle of the field. He's got plenty of arm. Now, he doesn't have quite the touch or accuracy of Purdy, but he's competitive as hell, and the ball comes out fast. He throws the short stuff and the intermediate routes on time. Then I saw some interviews that he did, and he's got a lot of the same thing Purdy has, is that kind of, I'm really, really confident in myself, but I'm really, really humble, and I'm kind of quiet and understated. It just reminded me a lot of Brock. He's under control, but then he's dynamic on the field with that 4.46 speed, and you can see it. He'll take off if if it's 3rd and 4 and he looks around and the receivers are covered. This guy puts 4.46 on the carpet and starts running. So I loved what I saw, and I think there's a very good chance he beats out Brandon Allen. And I'm not even that big of a Dobbs fan. I'm not even convinced that Mordecai couldn't beat out Dobbs. A lot of people are like, Krug, you're high, you're nuts, you're crazy, you're this, you're that. He's just a guy. Some guys like, I watched him for 2 years at Wisconsin. I'm like, that's interesting because he only played there for 1 year. But
it was a long season for Wisconsin, Larry.
I've watched this guy for the last 2 years at Wisconsin. One of those years he was at SMU. But go ahead, go right ahead.
I will say,
what are you hearing about Mordecai?
To be honest, I haven't checked up on Mordecai. And I am all, we can spend as much time on Mordecai as you want. I'm interested to hear what you think about Mordecai, in part because you were so early on Brock. But I've not checked on Mordecai, partly because I don't care about Mordecai. Or no. That's I said it wrong. No. I didn't care. That sounded
now,
like
now you sort of care.
Well, that sounded very snarky. I didn't mean it that way. I just like, what I mean is I don't care about their other quarterbacks. Like,
right.
We've spent so much time worrying about who the quarterback is. I focused my post draft on other things. But I think it's interesting, like what you said about you think he can beat out Brandon Allen. Like, to me, that is interesting because Brandon Allen clearly has a valued role to Kyle Shanahan on this team. They brought him as the third quarterback.
Smart.
He's calm. Very smart. He's played for McVay and Zach Taylor, right? He's backed up Joe Burrow. Like, so he's been in 3 Super Bowl. He's been on 3 Super Bowl teams. Rams. He was on the golf team that lost.
He's on the Bengals,
and then the Bengals, and Niners. So, like, I think beating out.
It's going to take something to beat him out.
Feld is a lot easier than beating out Brandon Allen. So,
yeah.
Now that said, I think it's very possible that you could keep Mordecai on your practice squad if
he doesn't light it up in the preseason.
Yeah, which, I mean, I guess he could, but there's just so many quarterbacks of that ilk that everyone wants to give a year on their practice squad to, that you could probably keep him around. Like, to me, just his completion percentage numbers are intriguing. Like, obviously his athleticism. So I'm intrigued, but I think it'd be pretty risky to replace. I think there's a value. There's clearly, they value Brandon Allen. Like, they really value Brandon Allen. And so you actually, now I'm intrigued to watch Mordecai. Like, could he take a spot?
I am too. I think he's interesting. I mean, I'll just say this, and I kind of put it in this category the other day. If you say Tanner Mordecai, something or nothing, he's something. As far as he's not a nothing. He's not a Nate Sudfeld. Do you have him? Do you not have him? Doesn't matter. This guy's got something. This guy's got something. Okay. I don't know if he'll be good enough.
I'll dive into some of the,
but he's got something.
I'll dive into some of the Mordecai. I'll look at some of the. I always go to
look at Mordecai, or look at him this summer. Look at him this summer when Brock Purdy made everything look pretty good, pretty easy in training camp. And nobody noticed for whatever reason. And then he played well in the preseason, and still relatively nobody noticed. And now I'm talking about his first year. But I see a lot of the similar traits here. Not quite the accuracy, but definitely like the humble, aw shucks, kind of authentic leader that Brock is. This guy's got the same thing going. Yeah. And Rashee Rice had 1,000-yard season at SMU catching the ball from Tanner Mordecai.
I mean, Look, there's a lot of 6'2", good-looking football players who were humble leaders running real estate companies right now. So successfully.
Good call.
I mean,
we'll see. We'll see.
Interesting. I'm looking at some of his PFF stuff. Okay. I'll look at some Tanner Mordecai.
Yeah, watch Tanner Mordecai. Croc said, "I can't. I'm pissed at Krug for getting me excited about a undrafted quarterback, but I'm not. It's not like every guy drafted by the Niners. I'm like, oh yeah, he's great. I started watching this guy with no opinion. No opinion. If anything, I had kind of a negative opinion. Yeah, he's smallish quarterback.
Yeah,
But
hey, can you put there's a comment here from a guy named Justin. Can you put that on the screen? Justin, yeah. Medical device sales pipeline.
Better have his degree. You don't get those jobs without a degree. Can't sell medical equipment without having at least a bachelor's.
Is that right?
Yeah, that buddy of mine's like, hey man, I want to sell medical equipment. I'm like, but dude, you didn't graduate. He's like, doesn't matter. Like 3 months later, he's like, yeah, I guess you had to have graduated. He's like, I didn't get the gig. Like, that's all right, bud. It's all right. There's a lot of other gigs out there. Okay, Evan Anderson, defensive line. They signed this monster kid out of Florida Atlantic, and they gave him $300,000. They gave him like $30,000 as a signing bonus. They gave him like $250,000 or something like that, guaranteed towards
$280,000.
Yeah, so it's like $280,000 combined guarantee. That's a ton of guaranteed money. That might be the highest guaranteed money I've heard go to an undrafted player. This guy was like 360, and I saw his film, and he just could not move. Now he's down to 320. They just worked him out right before the draft. They obviously liked him. They look at him as a one technique run stuffer. You know anything about Evan Anderson and just overall, what do you think of the 49er defensive line? Because this is like kind of where this is important to them, that they have a good defensive line. And, they lost Eric Armstead, and they added Malik Collins, Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, and now Evan Anderson. What do you think of this D-line? I mean, they're going to camp with 18 different bodies there. They still got Drake and Robert Beal and Kalia Davis and Antonio Bryant or Austin Bryant and T.Y. McGill and all these guys. I mean, is the Niner defensive line a strength? Are they better than they were last year? Do you know anything about this kid Anderson?
I don't know anything about Anderson. I reached out to FAU and about one of his coaches. Who's the coach at FAU is Tom Herman.
Oh, really? The former Texas coach.
Yeah. And remember, he was on the Bears staff for a year, but I haven't heard back. I haven't heard anything of substance back. But he does seem to me like, to your bigger picture question, I think you and I, going back to last year, spent a lot of time, as a lot of people have, talking about the edge rush spot opposite of Bosa. But I think, one thing that I came away from the season, just as a lot of people probably did, thinking about was, as much as you like a lot of Javon Hargrave, you do just kind of need a space eater in there as well, right? Somebody that just gets low and anchors and stops the run. And this guy, that might be a little much to ask right away for an undrafted free agent, but I wonder if they view him as like really a potential, just kind of run stuff space eater. I know he had 3.5 sacks last year, which for a guy at 360 is that's a lot. Like, I would imagine not too many guys at nose tackle, 360 pounds, had 3.5 sacks last year.
Yeah.
But to me, they do kind of need that. I do think there is the potential that this defensive line is better than last year's. Partly the Armstead injury was a major issue for them. So I do think there's that potential. I mean, it feels like they've raised the floor on the defensive line this year. Are they still going to be looking for a high ceiling edge? Maybe Leonard Floyd will go get 7 sacks opposite of Bosa, and we'll be like, oh, they have that. They may still be looking for that. But really, I think at times in the Lions game, we saw this, like, just plugging up what was a little bit of a leaky interior line, I think was important. And I think they might. I'm not convinced they did it yet, but I think they might have.
Last question.
What do you think? What's your answer to that question?
Well, I think that you're right. They need a plugger. They need a clogger in the middle. I think that Armstead had chronic injuries, and when you have chronic injuries, those don't get better. And so, even though I love Eric as a guy, I think he's, and I would have loved to have seen him get to that 10-year, be on that 10-year wall. I think that was important to him. He played 9 years with the Niners, so that's kind of a bummer for him. But plantar fasciitis doesn't get better. I've never seen anybody I used to have plantar fasciitis, but I don't anymore. It's like, and then he sounds like he's maybe got a chronic knee situation as well. And I like Malik Collins' power, and I love Jordan Elliott's defense this last year against the run. And I don't know that either of them are smart and the kind of reliable force that Armstead has been, but I think they're going to be healthier. And I think combined, those two guys combined basically made what he was going to make. So they got a kind of a 2-for-1, and I like both of them. I loved Collins' strength coming out of Nebraska. I thought he was one of the strongest defensive tackles I think I've seen. I mean, he was just absolutely amazing. Jordan Elliott, I love the footwork and the pass rush, but he had some great PFF numbers this last year. He was like the 6th best defensive tackle against the run this year. So I like both those guys. And I think this line is a little bit better than last year's line because of Floyd and the health of Collins and Elliott. But we'll see. Hargrave was hugely disappointing. Can he bounce back? Can he have a bounce back year? And then as far as Evan Anderson, if you got to have, you got to have one guy at least that you can put in there on short yardage that they cannot move. And he's slow, and I don't see him piling up tackles, but one of the keys for the Niner defense is keep Fred Warner's legs clean, keep Greenlaw's legs free, so those guys can go run and hit. And I think this guy has the ability to absorb bodies and blockers inside and maybe keep offensive guards and centers from climbing to that second level. I mean, they got pushed around by Detroit, and Detroit's O-line climbed to the second level and picked off Warner, and the Niners were absolutely lucky to win that game. So I just think that now that DJ Reader, now that you've got Detroit as a monster that can even be better on the defensive line. Their O-line's still really good. They just added this kid Mahogany, who's also a monster in the run game. They're one of the teams you got to match up with in the NFC, and if you don't match up, they're going to push you around. And I think Evan Anderson might be able to make the team, but he's going to have to show more movement ability than I saw at Florida Atlantic. Otherwise, you got to move a little bit in the NFL. You got to be able to come off of a block and make a tackle. So, last one for you. Appreciate the time, by the way. Which if we said that the Niners' main competition is Philly, Detroit, Green Bay, and the Rams in conference, is there one of those teams that you thought did the best in the draft this weekend or last weekend? Because it seemed like they all had decent drafts. Rams got Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Blake Corum. They also got Cam Kinchins, Bo Limmer. They had already signed Jonah Jackson, Kevin Dotson to the O-line, Cameron Curl, Tre'Davious White to the secondary. That's what they did. And then there's Detroit and Philly. Philly added Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Aeneas Smith, Jeremiah Trotter. They had already signed in free agency Saquon Barkley, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White, Bryce Huff, and then Detroit. Detroit got Terrion Arnold and Brian Rakestraw, Sione Vaki, and Mahogany, and then they had signed in free agency DJ Reader and Marcus Davenport up front, and Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson at corner. So they've added Amik Robertson, Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, and Enos Rakestraw to their secondary, and that's really where they needed help. Which of the contenders do you fear the most coming out of the draft?
Well, I mean, I think the Rams have the best coach of the group. I think we'll see if one of my general overarching 2024 NFL things to watch is the Packers really take a jump. I think a lot of people are going to be high on Green Bay.
Yeah.
Remember, we did a stream last year. I told you they were the team I thought that didn't make the playoffs that was going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Last
early
year.
on, you loved them, and you were on them early.
And part of it was I like Jordan Love. Like I thought Jordan Love, based on the little that we'd seen him, was about to be a good football player. Now, I always feel like I got to be Goldilocks. I do wonder if it's going to go a little too far. But I think with Philly and the Rams, you see, like they each did something, and I don't think they were thinking about the Niners necessarily. But they each did something early with like they each had a theme early. Rams got 2 defensive linemen early. Eagles got 2 defensive backs early. And, that's just an effort to do one thing great. And like we saw with Kansas City, and Kansas City has a good defensive line, but they did one thing great that helped them win the Super Bowl was they defend receivers. They lock up receivers. They're great at it.
Snead, McDuffie, awesome.
Yeah. And now we'll see, like they lose Snead, but so I think both of those teams, just because I really like the Rams as just a general operation, and they're in a unique spot. I mean, they hadn't had a first round pick since Goff. Like, so this is a big draft for the Rams. If they nailed the Jared Verse pick, that's a huge deal for them, right? For a team that we thought their Super Bowl window had slammed closed and they were about to lose their coach and maybe their quarterback's too hurt to ever continue his career at any level of, Pro Bowl level. Well, their coach stayed and their Pro Bowl quarterback is healthy, and now they drafted a D lineman and then another D lineman. So I would say the Rams, just because I believe the Rams know what to do best with their players more so. Like, the Eagles are in a weird spot because if Philly has a good year, they're going to lose a coordinator again. But if they have a good year, it might be because of the coordinator.
Well, they brought in Fangio, right?
Well, yeah, I guess they're not going to lose Fangio to be a head coach. If their offense
they could. I mean, they could.
I think it's unlikely. Yeah. But if their offense is good, now their offense just may not be good enough again. Like it
didn't seem like they had some bad vibes going on late in the year between Jalen Hurts and some of the linemen, and it's
so
I don't know. The Philly's a tough market to keep it all together in because the media is such a factor.
Well, and I just think their coach is a little overwhelmed by the whole thing.
Yeah.
So even though I like their first 2 picks, I just don't think they can maximize it. So I would say the Rams, partly because here's the other answer to this question. Let me pull it up. But the Niners I think the window has kind of closed for the Niners on the NFC, on what happened the last 2 years, which was you could just walk through the NFC West, right? The NFC
Arizona,
West,
Seattle, and the Rams all had pretty good drafts.
Seattle won 9 games last year. Okay, that's 4 fewer games than the 49ers won. Sorry. That was 22. 23, the Rams won 10 games. Good year. Niners won 2 more games than that. And the year before, Seattle won 9. Niners won 13. So I think I think the whole thing, the NFC is coming up, West is coming up a little bit. Even Arizona, I think, is going to be a little better this year. I think Seattle.
Jonathan Gannon is a really underrated coach, I think.
And Kyler is just better than most quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Now, I think Seattle's kind of capped because of Geno, but I really like their offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb.
Really glad Seattle didn't get Penix. Really glad the Rams didn't get Penix.
Yep, same.
So
I do think I think the division's going to be harder this year than it's been the last 2 years. And I think part of that is, we know the Niners play the Rams well, but it's never necessarily easy. So I would say the Rams, just because I think the Rams have the most pedigree of that group. Again, Detroit.
I think Detroit's coming. Detroit's coming.
But I just think they're kind of
limit them, or
I think so. Now they kept Ben Johnson. That's a big deal.
Yeah, but I just think they're coming because look at the personnel. They've done a nice job. Brad Holmes, who came from the Rams, has done a spectacular job of just targeting what they need, and they just systematically go down the list. We need this. We need an interior guy, DJ Reader. We need somebody opposite Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport. Then all of a sudden, we need DBs, and they get Terrion Arnold. And I think Arnold is kind of special as a person.
So is Detroit your team to answer this question?
Detroit would be my team that's coming the most, I think, because I just think that even though Goff's got limitations, I think Dan Campbell's done such a great sell job to him that he's playing at a high level, and I love their weapons. I think their weapons are real. I love their O-line. Philly's O-line's great but old. Detroit's O-line's great but young and getting better.
And they run the ball.
So, and they can run the ball, and they got 2 great runners. They got a great tight end. They got a home run hitter in Jamison Williams. They got to move the chains guy in Amon-Ra. They stayed healthy this last year. We'll see if that continues. But
did you say tight end?
Yeah, I mean the tight end Laporta's awesome. Yeah. Really, really good. So, but they also, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a major factor, and he's now in Philly. So I think Philly and Detroit scare me the most. Green Bay just is kind of like like an ice. They're moving at a glacial pace. I mean, but they're getting better. But it's like this slow, gradual, getting better thing. I don't know if they're quite there yet. I didn't love Jordan Morgan in the first round, and that to me kind of set the tone. But they got some good players after that, but including Edgerrin Cooper, who's going to help them quite a bit. But
the other thing to add here, Larry, is part of winning a championship for the Niners is Brock Purdy has to keep getting better too, right? Jordan Love gets better. Like we're talking about, are the Lions going to get better? Well, Brock Purdy has a chance to get better, right?
Yeah.
This is his first full off season, coming off his first full year as a starter. So if he improves the way young quarterbacks can improve, then the 49ers are better. Like they have to get better also, right? Just because you beat one team last year doesn't mean you don't get to just beat them again. Like you got to have to beat the Lions again. You got to we beat the Rams all the time. Well, you got to keep beating them then if you want to get to the Super Bowl again, right? You got to keep doing it. It's hard. So I think that's a factor too. Like if you did this from a Lions perspective or an Eagles perspective, or you look at it and go, all right, who got better of these other guys? But I think the thing that Detroit has, man, is like you don't get to just push Detroit around, right? The whole like the Niners come in and puff their chest out. Like Dan Campbell gets a lot of credit. The Lions are unfazed by all that stuff, right? They'll go toe to toe.
It's so funny because Dan Campbell is like one of my favorites, and he's done an amazing job. But he definitely hurt them in that game going for it all those times.
Yeah,
and he showed his rawness and his newness in that spot. But they're coming. There's absolutely no doubt that the Lions are coming. Man, the voice, you're coming, man. You're on the way back. Yeah. You're on the mend, man.
I'm recording it.
You're sounding quite a bit better. I should have gone to one of our old streams from the last couple of weeks. And it was kind of higher and scratchy. Yeah. But now it's settled in. You're sounding much more like Guy Haberman.
I'm getting there. Thanks to all the people who stuck it out, have been sticking it out. I called the Colorado spring game this last weekend. That was the first like broadcasting I've done since vocal cord surgery, and it was a lot of it was
any
squeaky. Comments
or
no, but it's a spring game. You don't have to you don't call it like a real game, so it was what what I mean. Like somebody ran a touchdown run, and you're like, oh, touchdown run. But it was far from back, but far from bottom of the barrel, which is what it was. So thank you.
You're on the mend, baby. You're coming back.
As Coach Prime says, we coming.
Is Shedeur Sanders going to be the number 1 pick in next year's draft?
We had a meeting. We had a long meeting with Pat Shurmur, who's Colorado's offensive coordinator.
Football head. He's been around forever.
Yeah. And he was going through all the things that make Shedeur Sanders special in his mind. He's like, he sees the game. It slows down for him. He says he's accurate in both ways you need to be accurate, meaning ball placement and touch. And he's like effusive. Right now it's his quarterback, whatever. But he was he's saying like, this is what I say to all the scouts. And then we said to him, well, do you think he's going to be the number 1 quarterback? And he's like, well, I'm not going to put that on him and that sort of thing. But he clearly thinks that Shedeur Sanders is and I don't see how he could not be at this point a first-round quarterback, even with people are going to hate his tweets and blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing about Shedeur. Like, if you just talk to him, he's got a lot of flack the last 2 days. Dion has too, for like some tweets about players, that sort of thing. And I think I think the draft process will be really interesting because there's going to be a lot of criticism for him, rightfully and understandably. I also think, this is just my prediction, that some teams are going to sit down with him and find him really engaging and likable. Like, he's not going to talk in these meetings with teams the way he comes off in tweets or in like YouTube videos. So that almost sounds like I'm defending him or apologizing. I'm not. I'm just telling you right now. I think some teams are going to come out of meetings. They're going to go into meetings going, here's this arrogant kid. And they're going to come out of meetings thinking, he's actually kind of likable. I think that's going to, I don't know. I think that's going to happen because I'm just telling you, like, when you talk to him, he's humble and likable. So I don't know. It's just an interesting dynamic because I can already tell right now there's already some of this, like, teams are going to hate this guy next year stuff.
Well, Prime didn't do his kid any favor by saying, he doesn't want to play in cold weather and this and that. That makes him look like a diva.
Well, and they've been tweeting about transfer portal guys and, like, he had Shador. I don't know if you saw Shador had a thing today. Some guy said, Coach Prime didn't know my name, and Shador's like, I don't even know who you are. You must be mid. Like, there's this. It's so like there's going to be a lot. It's
mature. Thing,
no,
yeah.
It's not. And like all the stuff that people said about Caleb, it's going to be like times 10 with Shador. I'm just telling you. I think some teams are going to sit down and go, oh, this is very different. I don't know. We'll see, but I think he's going to get a rave review from his offensive coordinator. So
should be interesting. I mean, if you can play quarterback, you're going to get chances. I mean, heck, it sounds like Dallas declined Trey Lance's 5th-year option, and we'll see if he winds up somewhere else. But they were never going to, take that 5th-year option because it would have blown up their cap, and I think everybody understood that, which is kind of why the Niners wanted to move him when they did, because they saw the handwriting. It's like a lot of people were like, just keep him and stay with it and just go with it. It's like, no. There's a thing called the 5th-year option. It's going to be like $17 million, and we can't have a backup quarterback on going for $17 million. So will he wind up in Vegas with the Raiders? I don't know, but
boy, Raiders, from what I heard, wanted Jane Daniels and wanted Penix and struck out on both of them.
Wow.
The other
took a tight end when they had
a tight end. Yeah. The other little draft nugget I'll give you for 2025 is this guy Travis Hunter that plays both ways for Colorado.
Yeah. Really athletic, really talented.
They're playing him at some nickel. They've moved him to nickel. They moved him inside this year, which I think is pretty interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that could add to his value.
Yeah. So
absolutely. All right, Guy. Good stuff, man. Have a great rest of your day. You got anything planned? You want to divulge, or will you be live streaming at any point later today?
I did one this morning. Probably not again later today unless something happens. Which, No, my wife and I are going up to Beaverton this weekend. So,
Oregon.
First thing tomorrow morning. Yep.
Nike Town.
Yeah.
That's Nike Town.
I didn't want to say anything, but I'm signing a deal with Nike, Larry. It's
well, my buddy, if you get pulled over by a Beaverton cop, it could be my college roommate. He's a policeman in Beaverton.
All right, I'll tell the Uber driver to speed.
Yeah, well, if you get pulled over and there's a guy in his mid-50s, say, hey, do you know Larry Krueger? That could help you.
Is he going to be sitting there watching a stream?
Yeah, exactly.
If he's like, hey, you were going too fast like Isaac Garenda, I'll know he's Larry Krueger's guy.
If he turns to you and he goes, hey, look, the voice is on the mend, you'll know that he is he has definitely watched the stream. I didn't even mention the sponsors off the start. I probably should. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle. Go get the brisket chili. Say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code KRUG, KRUEG, and they'll match you up to your first $100. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com on the web, a great company. If you need a new windshield, Marin Auto Glass is for you. And let's not forget our newest sponsor, Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Give Anthony Catania a call at 831-521-5264. Guy, great stuff, man. Always great to wrap football with you. Have a tremendous Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Larry. Great talking to you, man.
Thanks to everybody. Have a great day. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly